The average person in America is broke. Not fake broke either. Not I can't buy a third jet ski this month broke. I mean one unexpected medical bill away from being financially annihilated broke. And yet somehow every time you open social media you see 23-year-old crypto trader renting Lamborghinis, influencers flexing apartments they absolutely do not own, and entrepreneurs teaching you how to escape the matrix while living in Miami high-rises financed by Klarna and bad decisions. Which creates a weird contradiction, because if everybody online is rich, why is America simultaneously sitting on almost $19 trillion of household debt? Well, that's because a lot of modern wealth is basically theater, a giant economic cosplay where people use debt to look rich in order to become rich, and where entire industries depend on convincing you that everyone else is financially thriving except you. And the craziest part, it isn't even accidental. Our economic system fundamentally depends on people borrowing money constantly, because if consumers stop taking on debt tomorrow, a disturbing amount of the economy would simply implode, which sounds dramatic. But let me explain why most people aren't as rich as you think. Modern economies are not really built on cash, they are built on confidence. Confidence that people will continue borrowing, spending, consuming, and making payments forever. Because if you actually zoom out and look at how the American economy functions, debt is everywhere. Mortgages, car loans, student loans, business loans, credit cards, buy now, pay later apps, government bonds, corporate leverage. The entire system is basically a giant IOU with a flag attached to it. As of late 2025, American household debt reached roughly $18.8 trillion according to the New York Federal Reserve. Credit card balances alone surpass $1.2 trillion, which is the highest level ever recorded. And this is important because people often imagine debt as a sign of personal irresponsibility, when in reality, debt is structurally encouraged. You are literally rewarded for borrowing money. Your credit score improves when you successfully maintain debt. Banks make money from debt. Universities scale through debt. Car companies scale through debt. Government finance themselves through debt. Venture capitalists scale companies through debt and leverage. The housing market itself is almost entirely dependent on debt. Imagine trying to buy a house in cash in modern America. You would need the GDP of a small Balkan nation. And because debt stimulates spending, it also stimulates growth, which means politicians, corporations, banks, and investors all have incentives to keep consumers borrowing forever. Because consumer spending accounts for around 2/3 of the US economic activity. So when spending slows, panic begins. Suddenly, economists appear on television, looking like exhausted medieval plague doctors talking about consumer weakness, because what they really mean is that Americans are running out of money to borrow. Here's the thing that becomes genuinely fascinating. Wealth in modern society is not just used to buy things, it is used to manufacture credibility. The appearance of wealth itself has become a business model, because humans naturally associate luxury with competence, success, intelligence, and status, which means if you could look rich, people are more likely to trust you, follow you, invest in you, and buy from you. This is why influencers rent mansions, why fake gurus lease exotic cars. This is why startup founders wear $1,000 outfits while their companies lose money at catastrophic rates. Wealth signaling has become advertising. Andrew Tate exploded online partially because of this. He understood this better than partially anyone else on the internet. Before people listened to his advice, they first saw the Bugatti, the watch, the cigars, the private jets, the luxury. That was not the reward. The luxury was the funnel. Same thing with countless finance influencers on TikTok and Instagram. Many make more money selling the fantasy of wealth than actually being wealthy, which is honestly one of the greatest economic scams ever invented. You don't need to be rich anymore. You just need to appear rich long enough to monetize attention. And corporations do this too. WeWork became one of the most overvalued startups on earth, partially because it projected the aesthetics of infinite growth despite burning absurd amounts of investor money. Theranos convinced investors and even major companies that revolutionary blood testing technology existed largely through branding, charisma, and manufactured prestige, before eventually collapsing into one of the biggest fraud scandals in Silicon Valley history. Because humans do not evaluate wealth rationally, we evaluate wealth emotionally. If someone looks successful, our brains assume they are competent, which is probably why people online keep taking financial advice from guys named CryptoLinks97, standing next to a rented Ferrari. Now this is the part where social media completely destroys people's perception of reality, because the average American is not living in a luxury condo in Miami, drinking sparkling water, imported from the tiers of Scandinavian billionaires. The median transaction account balance in America is roughly $8,000, according to recent analysis of the Federal Reserve survey data. Not 80,000, 8,000. And the Federal Reserve recently found that many Americans still struggle with relevantly small emergency expenses while debt burdens continue to rise. This means that millions of people are living in a constant balancing act. Paycheck, rent, food, gas, subscription services you forgot existed. Repeat. And despite constant displays of luxuries online, most Americans are firmly middle class or lower middle class. The issue is that the internet disproportionately shows exceptional lifestyles because algorithms reward aspirations. Nobody clicks on, guy responsibly contributes to retirement account, but they will click on 21-year-old dropshipping millionaire buys his 7th McLaren while explaining passive income. Social media compresses your perception of reality. You begin comparing your normal life to the top 0.1% of visible online people, which creates financial insecurity, even among objectively normal people. And because status competition is deeply human, many people compensate by spending beyond their means. Luxury clothing financed through credit cards, cars financed through debt, vacations financed through payment plans, which loops back into the system because now debt is being used not only for survival, but for social signaling. You are no longer buying products. You are buying identity. One of the weirdest things about modern capitalism is that struggling people are often pressured to look financially successful at any time. There's an enormous social pressure to appear upwardly mobile, which creates a culture where appearances matter more than financial stability. People finance weddings they cannot afford, finance cars that they cannot afford. People buy designer clothes while carrying credit card balances with interest rates that look like punishment from an ancient deity. Buy now, pay later systems have exploded because consumers increasingly need financing for ordinary purchases, which is honestly terrifying. Human civilization has reached a point where people are financing burritos, and corporations love this because frictionless spending increases consumption. If pressing a button instantly gives you dopamine, your monkey brain stops asking, until the bill arrives like a medieval tax collector. And what makes the cycle dangerous is that visible consumption creates social pressures for everyone else. When enough people pretend to be rich, normal people begin feeling poor, even if statistically they are average. This is why economic inequality online often feels more extreme than it technically is. Because wealth today is performative, luxury is context, money is aesthetic, and social media platforms algorithmically amplify the most financially unrealistic people on the earth. Because envy generates engagement, which is a sentence so dystopian, it sounds like dialogue from a cyberpunk game, written by sociology majors. So who is actually rich? This is where people get genuinely confused, because Americans dramatically underestimate how concentrated wealth actually is. The richest 1% of people control an enormous portion of national wealth, while the top 0.1% alone holds a staggering amount of assets, according to the Wealth Management and Federal Reserve data. Real wealth is usually not visible. Actually, wealthy people often own stocks, real estate, business equity, private investments, and land. They own assets that generate cash flow. Meanwhile, fake rich people own liabilities. There's a massive difference between looking rich and being financially secure. Someone driving a leased BMW while carrying $20,000 in credit card debt may look richer than an engineer quietly maxing out their retirement account every year. But one is building wealth. The other is renting status. And ironically, many truly wealthy people deliberately avoid obvious displays of luxury because preserving wealth often requires restraint, which is incredibly disappointing because Hollywood taught me billionaires spend every afternoon swimming through golden coins like Scrooge McDuck. But in reality, a lot of people who are wealthy are aggressively boring. They buy index funds, they own businesses, they avoid catastrophic debt, they let compound interest do the heavy lifting, which unfortunately is much less cinematic than cryptocurrency millionaires screaming inside rented penthouses. So no, most people are not as rich as you think. What you are often seeing online is a combination of debt, marketing, survivorship bias, algorithmic amplification, and financial performance arts. And honestly, once you realize this, the internet starts making way more sense. The guy flexing Lamborghinis might own it, or he might owe $1,700 a month for the next 7 years while selling a course titled Escaping the Rat Race. The influencer in Dubai might be wealthy, or she may be one missed sponsorship away from moving back in with her parents. The economy itself encourages this illusion because consumption keeps the machine running. The more people spend, the more businesses grow. The more businesses grow, the more investors profit. And the easier it becomes to convince everyone that prosperity is everywhere, even when millions of people are financially stressed, which is why understanding wealth matters. Because if your perception of normal becomes distorted, you can spend your entire life chasing appearances itself instead of stability. And at the end of the day, financial freedom is probably less about looking rich and more about reducing the amount of panic you feel when your car starts making a new sound. And honestly, that may be the most middle class sentence ever written. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.